Hello, FutureFoodCast listeners. We are excited to have another episode today. As you know, we are a group of industry experts and food technologists talking all about the future of food. I want to shout out to our sponsor, Farm to Plate, a software company who is committed to creating tomorrow's food ecosystem today. I'm Pam Line-Miller, your host, and today I'm welcoming with us Art Bell. He is the co-founder of Connect 12. Art, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, glad to be here, Pam.
Yeah, we're excited to dive into some of the unique things that you have to share with us today, Art. First of all, Connect 12 might not be a company name that some of our audience knows. If you could explain a little bit about what you do there and why you started doing that.
Yeah, sure. We're a management consulting firm focused on the food service industry. We've been around now for 7 years, consulting to all the different players in the value chain for food service. And that's really been one of our key missions and opportunities when we founded the firm. We saw an opportunity to really bring the value chain together in a new type of way. So working with not only restaurant operators, restaurants, and also other non-commercial food service places, but then also working with distributors as well as manufacturers and all the partners that service them. It's been an exciting time in the industry, and as we saw the need for connectivity growing, we really saw a niche that needed help. At the time we founded Kinetic 12, there was a lot more data coming on board for the industry. Me personally, I've been consulting and working with the industry now for 22 years, 12 plus years as a consultant, 10 years for a food service manufacturer in Chicago. And prior to that, I started in consulting. But it's really been a great journey as we put this together and build Kinetic 12. Initially, it was always there's no data in food service, right, compared to retail. Then about 10 years ago, it was like, no, there is data now. And now the question became, well, what do you do with it? And that was really one of the genesis for why we founded Kinetic 12. I've been working consulting for food service 7 years with Kinetic 12 and 5 years for a previous firm that wasn't focused on food service, was more general about CPG, retail, food, had a lot of other industries that they covered. But really kind of saw that opportunity to really grow that. And prior to that, I actually started my career at Deloitte Consulting, but then spent 10 years with a major food service manufacturer in the Chicagoland area. So, it's been an incredible journey with a lot of opportunities still ahead of us within food service.
Well, it sounds like you're well qualified to be working, in the management consulting space all across the value chain. And when Kinetic 12 is well positioned, you've got a lot to work with. As you said, there has been a lot going on in the area that you work. So what are some of the things that are happening out there in the food area, food service, retail, all of that?
Yeah, well, it's been an interesting time, as I'm sure many of your listeners know. Obviously, the pandemic changed a lot, but from our perspective, it really just accelerated a lot of trends that we saw going on. As we're thinking about connectivity, thinking about collaboration, those things were brewing, but it was always an industry that was slow to change, right? And really needed an impetus to really kind of think differently about the business. So, it was taking small steps. But then COVID happened, everything shut down. Then everything reopened and all the consumers wanted to go back out to restaurants and go out and get back to their normal life. But then there was the supply chain issue, right? Because now the labor wasn't there and you weren't able to get it. And now we're seeing the supply issues becoming better. So we're seeing progress in that area. But now it's, obviously inflation and what's the consumer going to do and how they're thinking about the dollar. So, it's really accelerated a lot of the things we saw when you think about technology, data, how companies work together. And now companies are no longer playing it such lip service. They're actually trying to think about, how do I build something that's more sustainable, and think about how I really work with my partners in a new way.
Yeah, and you talk about working with partners and the pandemic kind of forcing their hand, I think people had to lean on each other because everybody was trying to solve these big issues to be able to keep operating and deliver their product or service to the consumer, so that working with their partners together and trying to figure out how do we, first of all, there is more data available. There's a lot more analytics. So great to have somebody like you to take a look at that from a bird's eye view and be able to make recommendations on that, help people understand that, because the data is great, but if you don't know what to do with it, then that's not helpful, right? You've got to be able to take some action on that. So what are you seeing with the partners and working together? Like, is that helping with everybody meeting their supply needs and the supply chain communicating all the way end to end, or what? I'm sure it's a process.
It's still a process, and there's definitely more opportunities to go. We do a lot of work with the industry associations, particularly IFMA, the Food Service Manufacturers Association. They've been actually a very strategic partner of ours, and I personally have been working now with them for 10 years, and really around this space of how do we create a better network where we can do those things around sharing and pieces like that, especially with some of the information that's out there. But sometimes it's just, honestly, it's getting into a room, understanding what the issues is, and starting a frank conversation with parameters, right? So that's where we often come in with building tools and templates and thought starters and things that can help initiate that, to bring those partners together. But it also, you need other partners. So we've built a strong relationship as well with IFDA, which is the Food Service Distributors, International Food Service Distributors Association, because they are a key cog in all of the supply chain. And interesting enough, they've gone through such a transformation. I would say outside of the operators, which have been we'll talk a little bit about the restaurants in a second, but outside the operators, they've really been challenged the most. I mean, their old business models, when you think about not being able to get drivers, which was always a challenge even before the pandemic hit. And now you get, even lack drivers and warehouse staff. I mean, the amount of technology now that they're really thinking about and say, hey, I just can't do it. I can't staff a warehouse. It was such a manual business. How do I bring that technology in? What can I do? And now, but they can't do it alone, as we've talked to IFDA and some of their members about. Now they need the partners, they need manufacturers, they need operators to kind of think through and create that better value chain. And then I've left the operators to last, because it always starts with the operators from our perspective. When we think about our industry, if we can all better support the restaurateurs, the other food service operators, it helps everybody. It helps distributors, it helps manufacturers, it helps Kinetic 12, because they are the person that's really enabling that choice with that consumer, right? We want the consumers to come and have an enjoyable experience, enjoy eating out, so they continue to do it. And that helps fund all the things we're doing. And they've obviously had a very, very tough time, up and down through the last 2 years. But I will say, we do a product. We have a program called Emergence, which is really focused on emerging chains. So really think about those chains, maybe 50 to 250 that are growing quickly, right? So that they have the opportunity to really have an outside opportunity. Manufacturers are interested in them, distributors are interested in them, because it really helps them grow their business, because these are going to be the growth engines in the future. So we have a program where we talk to them quarterly. And I will say we just are wrapping up, our conversations for Q1, and they're actually positive. They're cautiously optimistic, which is great news for the industry. So we're seeing some people, they're thinking sales is okay, but they are acknowledging that the fundamentals of their business has changed. Like their cost of goods have changed, right? Their labor has changed. And while they're happy with sales and cautiously optimistic that they can, maybe that it won't be a recession and the consumer will still stick with them, they're also acknowledging that they need to change their business models, right, to make it more profitable. And they are engaging with people like distributors, like manufacturers, to do that. So, we are working directly with a number of operators. We've also worked with the the National Restaurant Association. They have a group around supply chain expert exchange, which we've worked in the past. And then actually IFMA has also created groups of operators. So there's a lot of, how do we get that voice of the operator into how we think about the model so we can create a better model out there.
Right. And I think, being out there and talking with those emerging chains and knowing what they're feeling right now, what do they need to keep their business moving forward? And that cooperation with the manufacturers, the distributors, the operators, it sounds like they all need to be talking and working together. So these organizations and the conversations are critical, I would think.
Yeah, and I think it's I think definitely there's we advocate just starting the conversation, right? And initiating the conversation, understanding who your strategic partners are, because obviously there's not enough resources in the whole industry to support a million conversations. There's a lot of different players in this industry. But once you understand who really, as a company, taking a self-assessment, understand who are those really key players, and then initiate that conversation and start talking about them, but then leverage the tools that are out there. It's not just an open-ended, hey, let's catch up kind of thing, or let's figure out the issues. Bring data, bring facts, bring innovation, bring solutions. They're looking, for example, we know operators are looking for labor solutions.
Okay.
And when you're calling on them as a manufacturer, think about that and bring those solutions. It's not just selling a product. It's really about how do I think about that solution that I can bring to the operator to help their business with my product as part of that.
Yeah, that's a really good, if you're any manufacturers out there listening to our podcast, Art just dropped a golden nugget right there. Bring your customers some solutions to the problems they have, other than the product you're selling or the service you're selling. What do you know about the industry that you can help them with? Well, Art, along those lines, I know that you're involved with a lot of different groups and you're dealing with that entire value chain and supply chain. But what are you seeing out there, either trends that are happening or things that we as an industry can be doing to do better? Are there some key things out there that are a focus at this current moment?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different, there's a lot of people that are trying different things. I think definitely, we did some work on behalf of a couple of industry associations and looking at some of the trends out there. And so things such as technology is a key trend, thinking about automation, right? When you think about warehousing, it's going to be another key trend that's out there. Thinking about other ways to source product. One thing that we see that's really growing quickly, especially in the distribution space, is this idea of the endless aisle, which actually comes from other industries. But it's the opportunity where distributors now are not necessarily looking to stock all the product that they have for an operator to a potential customer in their warehouses. They're looking to leverage whether it be third-party redistributors, whether it be manufacturers shipping directly on their behalf. But this idea of, how do I create a more efficient, asset in my warehouse and continue to service those customers, right? Technology is just playing a key role in that.
I just want to ask quick questions to make sure I understand about the endless aisle. I haven't heard that before. Is that what I understood you saying was that means maybe a distributor doesn't have to keep every product that they're going to get for an end consumer. They just have to know where to access it, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
They would have to be sourcing somewhere else, but they know they can get it.
Yeah. So what they'll do is they'll offer a product in their order guide, knowing that it's not in the local DC, but they offer it on the order guide. And then when an operator makes that order, it could be either shipped directly to the DC overnight from potentially a redistributor, potentially direct from the manufacturer, or the manufacturer. I know one of our clients, they're able to send the product directly on behalf of the operator. On behalf of the distributor straight to the operator.
Right.
So once again, adding value to that customer, and supporting a better value chain. So you don't have all this labor and stocking and, all the challenges with that, especially for some items that may be, aren't necessarily everyday items, like low turn type of products, and new items. That's another one we're seeing a lot, thinking about how sampling happens as a manufacturer. How do you get that product? So there's a lot of different ways now for manufacturers to think about servicing that operator, and they should really take a hard look at all those options and figure out what's best for them.
Well, and as an operator, I'm hearing several advantages here because operator A, Pam, I'm having trouble with labor. So the fact, if you as a distributor can provide me a single source for my orders, wow, that's already saving me trying to figure out where do I need to go? What manufacturer, what other distributor do I need to access and order certain things over here, other things here, maybe a third, just have it all disparate. If you're my central source, solving that issue for me where I can go to you and then let you leverage your relationships and partnerships, I'm willing to even maybe pay a little bit more for that, right? But also those manufacturers are happy, I would think, to have other ways to get their products to those operators that might not otherwise be getting them. So you can leverage that on several layers. I love that collaboration. That sounds like that would really help in several different areas.
Yeah. Another good one for your manufacturer listeners that we see a lot is, even fast casual, so kind of the thoroughbred of the industry, really, very natural, high quality ingredients. They're all rethinking, I won't say prepared foods, but how much of that labor to prep food is done there versus offsite, right? And I will tell you that, operators that you would never 4 years ago would say, oh no, we'll prep, we'll chop, we'll do all of the prep here. We want the best quality ingredients. Now are saying, well, if you can assure me a higher quality, I don't want the low quality kind of, thing, but if you can assure me the quality and you can help with labor, you can help with training, you can get me something that's pre-prepared a little bit. Usually they're having conversations that they wouldn't have had 4 or 5 years, and they're open to that. But once again, it's not for manufacturers, not necessarily leading with that product. It's really talking about, I know you potentially have a solution. I have a problem with labor in the back of the house. Here's some products with the highest quality, but can help you think through that and working with them. Once again, it's about the collaboration. It's not just a one-time sell. It's about talking through them and working with them to make sure they're comfortable and getting the quality they need for their units. So.
And it sounds like then individual operators could leverage the scale that a distributor or manufacturer might have, right? They don't have to, you don't have to have people at each end location. That just makes a lot of sense to be able to scale it up. If you can provide, like you've said multiple times, the quality, which is really important to that operator. That's probably the key, right? Just to give.
It is key. And it's one of those things, that's still a hurdle. But we know they're high quality products that manufacturers can prepare. So, that the hurdle's lower, but it's still a hurdle, right? You still need to make sure you're able to deliver upon that.
Right. So the operators we've been talking about, I think a lot are, restaurants or the fast casual, like you were just talking about. And, but what about other non-commercial places, like more universal, like hospitals or schools, or what's happening there? Because that's really a different market. Are you working in that area as well, I'm assuming?
Yeah, we do work. There's actually, through our relationship with IFMA, the Food Service Manufacturers Association, they've really taken the leading edge with what they call their food service leadership councils, which is really focused on some of those kind of non-commercial food service operations. And the interesting thing there is, honestly, it's amazing. We've led a number of groups and work sessions and are helping with some of the their day-to-day. And honestly, they just want support. They do feel like, the restaurants have taken a lot of time and resources and get a lot from the manufacturers. And they're like, hey, we have needs, we have opportunities, right? A lot of them are servicing a lot of consumers. They've gone through a lot of change. I mean, think about business and industry, B&I. I mean, they were shut down and now they have a whole new business model. I mean, because there's people that aren't going back to the office. So how do they need to change their operation? And so a lot of them are just looking for that connectivity and that information. One thing we typically talk to our clients about is a lot of that you have inherently from your work with restaurants, right? You know what's going on. And it's really powerful to take some of those learnings you may see in the commercial space with restaurants and just start applying those, to the non-commercial. They'll see a ton of value. You're bringing them solutions, you're bringing them products that help their needs. And that will really accelerate and create deeper, hopefully profitable relationships with them. So it's not necessarily creating new things. Sometimes it's just leveraging some of the things you've seen before, but just establishing that relationship, especially with those key, LLO, those local leverage operators, those big ones that control their purchasing decisions, and helping them build those things, and they'll be loyal. They'll definitely support you.
Okay. Very interesting. So everybody's really looking for solutions is kind of what I'm hearing you saying. There seems to be a lot of conversation happening, and people are trying to figure out, because the problems, the challenges are really across the spectrum. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah. Well, what we said is it's interesting when, prior to me joining, the food service industry 20 years ago, I worked in management consulting. So I hit a lot of different industries, financial services. I worked for some of the autos. I actually worked in coal, interesting enough. Besides CP, I did do some CPG work as well. No value chain is like the food service value chain I've seen. It is really interesting. It's ripe for disintermediation, because there's so many intermediaries. We've made it very complex. There's a lot of, historically, there's been a lot of lack of trust and a lot of lack of transparency within the value chain. So you really had all these silos that were kind of set up, and it was like tossing things over the silo, and hopefully, it gets where it needs to go in an efficient manner. And those are really starting, to break down. And so definitely there's opportunities to kind of, rethink that value chain with some of the technology that we're seeing come on. There's more to go. The conversations are part of it. There's definitely technology part of it. But definitely that evolution is occurring. I mean, we're starting to now see technology really come into play. You think about, things such as, transparency of products. So now, when we talk to a lot of operators, yes, the distributor sales were up. The DSR is still very important. But a lot are searching online now for products. They are, they're starting to look online and go to manufacturer sites, or go to, what we're calling marketplaces, but some of these technology-based, internet startups that are, that show it, different products that are available in different distributors. So it's really changing the model a lot. And so, when we think about how this needs to change, it's really an exciting point, but definitely it's one of those things where, definitely take stock, wherever you are. If you're a manufacturer, distributor, and operator, take stock of where you are, and think about the new model, because it's so complex, you can't do it alone. Your own technology, your own initiatives will only get you so far. You should do it, but your own efficiency initiatives, honestly, with this type of industry, will only get you so far. And then the next step is to kind of go out and kind of think about the whole network effect, and go out to your network and see how you can become stronger with your partners. And that will really start catapulting some of your efficiency efforts.
Yeah, a good point about leveraging what else is happening out there, and that you're limited by your own ability to figure out solutions, but you can leverage what other people have done just by getting out there and finding out what's happening. But something else you mentioned just a minute ago about the transparency, I think what I'm hearing with guests that have been on the podcast is that consumers are looking for more transparency in the whole supply chain for their food. And I think we're getting there faster with the restaurant operators and those individual client facing, a lot of times you can find out what the source of foods are in a restaurant. A lot of them are also talking about more local sourcing for that reason. They know right where things have come from. And with the challenges they had in the supply chain, they had to find alternative sources. So they went local, because then they didn't have to deal with boats and barges and all that was happening with sourcing outside of the country they were in. But in the more non-commercial space, and dealing with larger institutional providers, I think it's a little bit behind. I mean, if you go through some kind of cafeteria line or a business, you don't always know the sourcing. I think that's maybe a next frontier problem. I don't know. What are you seeing out there?
I think it is, but you'd be surprised. You would be surprised. In our work with some of the non-commercial operators, they're onto it. They're into it as well. Definitely. When you think about college and university, I would say outside of some higher end, like, when we think about menu adoption, and think about how trends get started from our partners, one of our strategic partners, Data Essential. So they've really pioneered this, some thoughts in this. I mean, it's really, fine dining, some of the ethnic dining, but then C&U is actually there because their consumers are right on the cusp of understanding these things. They often want to know where their products are. They're interested in, different the economic conditions of the workers making the product, right? Is this sustainably done? I mean, there's a lot of information that they want. And so definitely, I would put college and university right there, as well as some B&I, depending on the location, because not all restaurants, I mean, there's some fast food restaurants where they don't, the sourcing doesn't matter. It just needs to be good quality, the quality food to meet the customer value, and it needs to be quick and ready to eat, so I think there is a balance between that. But yeah, definitely tracking that for understanding and be able to tell that story for consumers is huge, right? And we did see a dip in that a little bit during the pandemic, right? It was going very strong. The pandemic hit, and just like, okay, I just need food, right? As long as you can get me food on the plate, I just want to get out to the restaurant. I'm less interested in that. But that's now coming back right now. The consumers, people are eating at restaurants, are back to kind of their normal lives in a lot of ways. Now they're saying, hey, I do care, about, not only where the food comes from, but the company that's providing the food, will tell me about, where you're sourcing it, but tell me a little bit about you as a company, as a manufacturer of food. So you guys, manufacturers definitely need to be ready with that story, definitely for some segments that are really interested in that.
Yeah. And that's really an interesting point. And I'm glad to hear that some of those non-commercial operators are right up there. I just didn't have a window into that. I knew that you would. That's why I brought that up. So thank you for sharing that. Wow. I'm sure we could talk all day, but we've covered a lot of really interesting topics all through the value chain and IFMA and IFDA, and just all the different impacts that different associations in the industry can have and are having. Encourage our listeners who are in places where joining some of those associations would make sense for them to check out what's going on there and get involved and help be part of the solutions. But Art, I would love to know if there's anything else you'd like to tell our listeners before we go today. Any kind of initiative, any kind of thoughts, positive outlook you see, whatever it might be.
Yeah, I think definitely it's an exciting time for the food service industry. I mean, I think definitely those of us that have been waiting for change and hope and seeing the elements change it's finally arriving. So I would definitely tell them to embrace the change, right? That there's definitely a lot of opportunity there, to work with your partners in a different way. And I think this is the time, where we're really as an industry going to start moving forward. And sometimes, we've said there's always that potential for disintermediation, right? For somebody to come in and really shake up this industry. And it hasn't happened yet. I personally believe it's because of some of the complexity we talk about, but it's always better for the industry itself to adopt, right? Because there's established players who have a lot of resources that can help, as well as some of these new nimble players. I mean, we didn't even talk about plant-based and some of these new product companies that are coming out on the scene. But definitely, think about your business, in a new way, because there's definitely opportunity, and there'll be partners that are looking for that as we try to evolve this. So for the next century, hopefully, at least the next 10 years, we'll say. Century might be ambitious.
Well, maybe we could meet partway and say the next 50 years, Art.
Next 50 years. So yeah, but like I said, we love it. We love working with partners in the industry. It's part of our DNA. Like, we love, working with manufacturers and distributors and operators. And we think By talking to everybody, it gives us better solutions for everybody. Even if it is a project just for a manufacturer, by us knowing what the distributors are saying and the operators are saying, we can build better solutions. So we love working and where we sit in the industry. And I encourage people to go to associations like the Food Service Manufacturers Association, like IFDA, the Distributors Association, like the National Restaurant Association. There's a lot that are out there, and they're playing a key role as we think about how to unite this industry and really lead this thing forward.
Yeah. Well, we are excited that you're a part of it and sharing your expertise with all of the clients that you work with, Art. And we're so happy that you were able to spend some time with us today on the FutureFoodCast. I also want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Farm to Plate, again, a software company. They're enabling better food supply chain management. And you can check out more at farmtoplate.io. Thanks again, Art, for being with us.
Okay, great. Thank you for having me, Pat.
Thanks for listening to Future Foodcast. Future Foodcast is powered by Farm to Plate, the leading food blockchain platform. Subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts to stay up to date with the very latest innovations in the food industry.